Hello, thanks for tuning in to our presentation about GIPA Homefires, understanding IPHA leadership towards holistic response to STBBIs. I'm Michael Parsons, an IPHA and co-coordinator of the GIPA Homefires project with the Canadian Aboriginal AIDS Network.
And I am Charlene France. I'm the other co-coordinator for the GIPA Homefire project. I also work for CAN, and I got into AIDS work specifically because my father was diagnosed when I was really young. So it was something that I was always interested in doing.
First and foremost, we would like to acknowledge the first peoples of Turtle Island for honoring the land we work on and the ancestors connected to this land throughout time. We acknowledge that many of these lands are unceded lands, which were taken through illegal means. We acknowledge the community members who shared very personal information, data, which made this research project possible, including previous administrators of the project. Thank you for trusting us.
So who is involved in the GIPA Homefire project?
The GIPA Homefire project brings together IPHAs, academics, and community to explore greater involvement of people living with HIV and AIDS, GIPA, and leadership.
What's this project about?
We are looking at Indigenous people living with HIV and AIDS who are currently in leadership roles.
And has lived experience of HIV or AIDS had a positive impact on IPHAs and on the Indigenous HIV or AIDS movement?
Participants, by and large, indicated that it absolutely did.
So what methodologies were used?
This project applied a mixed methods, multi-pronged approach. The quantitative portion was an online survey. The qualitative portion was a follow-up using one-to-one interviews. Questions were informed by a literature review and developed in collaboration with our team and were culturally grounded. The critical analysis was informed by documents, which were GIPA statements and organizational interviews.
So how were decolonizing and Indigenous ways of knowing and doing used?
So the pipe was loaded and sat with me in IPHA while the PhD professor drew out parameters that needed to be represented within the analytical document for the critical policy analysis. Ergo, the pipe led the way. When the PhD professor typed the parameters into a database, the next day, the document which contained the 7 Rs was the first thing that was revealed. This was also a two-eyed seeing approach because both a PhD professor and an IPHA were instrumental in finding the document by working together. The data collection was a multi-pronged approach, collecting GIPA policies, conducting organizational interviews, and collecting data through a survey. And of course, the one-on-one interviews. How many participants did you have for the survey, and how many interviews were you able to do?
So we stopped data collection at the end of January of this year, and we had a total of 117 responses to our online survey and 20 one-on-one follow-up interviews.
Who did you hear from in the survey?
So majority of the participants were between 36 and 55 years of age, identified as women, identified as heterosexual. They stated that they had been living with HIV or AIDS for 15 years or longer. They identified as being single. They indicated that they lived alone. A majority of respondents were from Ontario and lived in large urban cities. And there's also some key demographic points here in this slide.
What leadership roles did IPHAs indicate they would like to take on?
So IPHAs indicated in the survey that they would like to join a research team. They wanted to share and educate about HIV and living with the virus, starting a job at an AIDS service organization, mentoring another IPHA, leading a ceremony, being a member of traditional lodge or council, delivering a workshop, and presenting or co-presenting at a conference. It's interesting to note here, another question that we had asked, what roles are IPHAs currently in? And there was quite a bit of overlap. So current roles that IPHAs identified that they were working were similar to these roles. So it's interesting that IPHAs want to take on these roles that don't as well.
What holistic approaches and supports were there for leadership roles?
So on the left, we have who supported our IPHAs, which they listed a number of different people and organizations. And then on our right are ways in which respondents indicated holistic approaches in participating in ceremony and practices for healing and celebrations. It's important to note here that a lot of the participants indicated that they found their strength in connection to culture, and that could be by the creator, connection to the land, and Indigenous knowledge and teachings.
Were there barriers to accessing culture and ceremony?
So there were barriers that were identified throughout the survey. So financial costs, maybe they can't afford it. They can't find the right cultural service provider. There might not be any access, or they didn't know where to go to have connection to culture and ceremony. They might have been too busy. And respondents indicated stigma as a reason for not accessing culture or ceremony. But it is important to note or highlight that majority of respondents do participate in Indigenous ceremonies for healing and celebrations, and stated that they had no reason not to participate.
What are some of the next steps?
So some of the next steps are policy and practice implications. So a review of GIPA-related policy documents and organizational leadership interviews will complement the individual survey and interview data. So these additional reviews will contribute to our understanding of how these organizations have actually enacted GIPA principles. Our multi-pronged approach will frame our research findings as action-oriented recommendations to really maximize positive outcomes. And this is through implementation science approach to develop interventions and evaluate current interventions we have.
We would like to thank you very much. Thank you so much for watching our presentation. You can get a hold of us at michaelp@can.ca or charleneF@can.ca. We thank and acknowledge all of our team members, all of our research participants, and our sponsorship at CAN, our previous coordinators of the project, McMaster University, the University of Victoria, and of course, the sponsor of the organization, Canadian Institute for Health Research, who funded this research project.
Thank you so much.